The disaster known as Disney Star Wars continues to get worse and worse and worse. And we're not even talking about things that they're doing right now. It's decisions that were made long ago. Because if you've been following this channel for any significant time, I've been covering Disney Star Wars forever. And it has been disaster after disaster after disaster. Now, the media machine would try to spin it and tell you that it was different, but the reality of the situation is the majority of Star Wars fans have completely checked out on the franchise based on Disney's decisions. Well, here we have a story. George Lucas' axed Star Wars series cost $40 million an episode and would have blown up the franchise. Disney would have never bought Lucasfilm if it got made. Of course, we're talking about Star Wars Underworld. George Lucas producer Rick McCallum recently appeared on an episode of the Young Indie Chronicles podcast and teased what would have been Star Wars Underworld, an ambitious Star Wars series that was one of the last Star Wars projects Lucas was working on before he sold the franchise to Disney in 2012 for $4 billion. The series was set between the events of Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope and would have acted as a bridge between the original Star Wars trilogy and the prequel trilogy, the latter of which McCallum produced. I think we had over 60 scripts, like third draft scripts, McCallum said, noting they brought the most wonderful writers in the world to Lucas Skywalker Ranch to map out and pin the series. These were dark scripts. They were sexy, they were violent, they were absolutely wonderful, complicated, challenging scripts. McCallum stopped short of providing plot details for Star Wars Underworld, but said the series would have blown up the whole Star Wars universe, and Disney would have definitely never offered George to buy the franchise. The producer said, "Not making Underworld remains one of the great disappointments of our lives," adding, "The problem was that each episode was bigger than the films, so the lowest I could get it down with the tech that existed then was $40 million per episode." The series effectively died when Disney purchased Lucasfilm. Well, the entire franchise effectively died when Disney purchased Lucasfilm. Kathleen Kennedy, who joined Lucasfilm in 2012 as co-chair alongside Lucas, was named company president after Disney bought it. She'd bring Star Wars to television years later with projects such as The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Andor, Skeleton Crew, and more. Kennedy also shepherded the sequel trilogy that included The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Return of Skywalker. The Return of Skywalker variety? Really? You guys don't even know what these shitty Disney films are called? Well, that speaks volumes about the shitty Disney film. It is The Rise of Skywalker, not The Return of Skywalker. Lucas said in an interview in 2020 that it was very painful selling his company to Disney and giving up control of the Star Wars franchise. At the time I was starting the next trilogy, I talked to the actors and I was starting to gear up. Lucas explained at the time why he sold Lucasfilm to Disney. "I was also about to have a daughter with my wife. It takes 10 years to make a trilogy. Episodes 1 through 3 took from 95 to 2005. I'd still be working on them." Or episode 9. In 2012, I was 69. So the question was, am I going to keep doing this for the rest of my life? Do I want to go through this again? Finally decided I would rather raise my daughter and enjoy life for a while. And I'm glad that George Lucas is enjoying life. He deserves every bit of it because he's a fucking legend. And I've always defended George and I always will. Lucas contemplated not putting Lucasfilm up for sale and instead having somebody else run the production of his planned sequel trilogy, but that isn't retiring. "I've spent my life creating Star Wars, 40 years, and giving it up was very, very painful," he added, "but it was the right thing to do. I thought I was going to have a little bit more to say about the next 3 because I'd already started them, but they decided they wanted to do something else. Things don't always work out the way you want. Life is like that." That's not exactly what he said. I actually have it pulled up what he said. So first of all, we have this right here where Kathleen Kennedy basically lies to George Lucas's face and lies to these fans' faces right here.
Continue is as we work essentially is in George's head. So the beauty of the collaboration that can continue is as we work our way through these scripts, if we're sitting and saying, I wonder if this character can do that, or does this make sense within the rules of Star Wars? That really, he's the keeper of the flame when it comes to that.
It's the same thing with the first three films. That's all my job is to be the keeper of the flame. Well, it's based on human behavior, human psychology, mythology, which is the sort of archaeology of human behavior and thinking. And since it has those motifs, it is very universal, and everybody can relate to it. It's about good and evil in us, as well as our institutions. So, and the idea that some of us think we're really great people, but in the real world we're not. We're terrible people.
Or you can make bad choices.
Well, you make bad choices, but you run your life in a very selfish way, and you think you're doing good when you're actually not. And at the same time, it's how do democracies turn back into dictatorships? Why do people who have the power to have the freedom and everything turn it over to somebody who's going to take it all away from them? It's happened through history forever and ever, and all Star Wars is a way of updating that idea to say, watch out, because there are people out there who don't play by the rules, and if you're not careful, you're going to lose all your freedom. It's a very big.
And of course, a lot of what he said, very reminiscent of what Kathleen Kennedy has done to Star Wars. There's a part here where she talks about, where she just straight up lies.
Big universe I've created, and there's a lot of stories that are sitting in there.
The main thing is to protect these characters, make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them, and that the universe of Star Wars continues to grow.
That was a lie. And of course, George Lucas talked about it right here.
They looked at the stories and they said, we want to make something for the fans. So I said, all I wanted to do was tell a story of what happened. It started here and it went there. And it's all about generations, and it's about, the issues of fathers and sons and grandfathers. And it's a family soap opera. I mean, ultimately. we call it space opera, but people don't realize it's actually a soap opera. And it's all about family problems and that. It's not about spaceships. So they decided they didn't want to use those stories. They decided they were going to go do their own thing, and so I decided, fine. But basically, I'm not going to try to. They weren't that keen to have me involved anyway. But at the same time, I said, I'm not going to. If I get in there, I'm just going to cause trouble.
They weren't keen on having him involved. That's not what Kathleen Kennedy said right here.
The main thing is to protect these characters, make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them, and that the universe of Star Wars continues to grow.
That is a lie.
Because they're not going to do what I want them to do, and I don't have the control to do that anymore, and all I would do is muck everything up. So I said, okay, I will go my way, and I'll let them go their way. And it really does come down to a simple rule of life, which is when you break up with somebody, the first rule is no phone calls. The second rule, you don't go over to their house and drive by to see what they're doing. Yes. The third one is you don't show up at their coffee shop or the things what you're going to run in. You just say, no, gone, history, I'm moving forward. Because every time you do, and we all learn this from experience, every time you do something like that, you're opening the wound again. And it just makes it harder for you. You have to put it behind you, and it's a very, very, very hard thing to do. But you have to just cut it off and say, okay, end the ball game. I got to move on. And everything in your body says, don't, you can't. And these are my kids. So
all those Star Wars films.
All the Star Wars films.
They were your kids.
Yeah, well, they are right. I loved them. I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and obviously to
and
sell
you
them
sold
off.
them.
I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and.
Okay, but having said all that, and having talked to you for the last, and known you for a while, and admired you, it must hurt you.
Well,
it's your family. It's the last story. It's your story.
But
it's
in the end,
you.
But I knew there's 3 more stories, and I knew that was going to probably take, to do it right would take about 10 years. And I said, I'm 70. I don't know whether I'll be here when I'm 80. Every 10 years the odds get less. And so I said, and I'm not ready to do that because I want to do these other things. So I have to make the decision on my own that it's time for me to move on.
So that's his actual quote. And Variety said something a little different. Maybe it's a different quote that they're reading from, but it's very similar in what they just quoted. And unless there's another quote or another interview that I'm not aware of, and maybe there is, but that's what George Lucas said. Now, what's interesting here is that, again, Kathleen Kennedy lied because she's a liar. She's a horrible person. But there's this really interesting clip right here, and I love how it's titled, Kathleen Kennedy Thinks George Lucas is Dead. Listen to this evil woman talk.
I did pose this provocative idea, who is Luke Skywalker, that would be something that was said by one of our characters.
Why was who is Luke Skywalker such a fascinating question?
I guess because it spoke to a new generation. It was that idea that there would be young people for whom Luke Skywalker was essentially a myth.
There isn't a day that goes by or went by as we were making the movie where we don't talk about George. You know, it's the standard, what would George do? One of the things that
You have his contact information. You know him. Why are you questioning what would George do when you can literally pick up the phone and ask him, but you threw all of his outlines away?
Movie where we don't talk about George. You know, it's the standard, what would George do?
Absolutely insane. So, again, man, it's disgusting. It's horrible what we've seen with Star Wars, and Disney will never, ever regain any of the prominence that Star Wars had after what they've done since they purchased this company. It's disgusting. But I want to let you guys know about Meta PCs. If you are interested in getting yourself a computer or a laptop, you can go to metapcs.com and use the promo code 199. If you go over there and support them, you're supporting us, and we greatly do appreciate it, and we hope you will go check out their website. Link is in the description and the pinned post on this video and all of our videos, so please go check them out. In closing, you know, with this whole situation and Rick McCallum's comments, it is sad, but I guess because I've moved on so much from Star Wars, it's not as painful as it used to be, but it is frustrating nevertheless, because Star Wars has just been such an important part of my life and so many other people's lives, and it shouldn't have ever been treated like this. Disney had all the resources, they had all the information, they had everything they needed, and they completely killed and destroyed George Lucas's wonderful creation. And I know there was a lot of people out there that didn't like the prequels. I am not one of them. I have always been a prequel defender, and I've always stood for George Lucas's Star Wars, and I will continue to do that because that is the real Star Wars. That's the only Star Wars. Yeah, there has been little things here and there that I've liked within Disney Star Wars, but not like the majority of stuff I have not liked. And I'm willing to get rid of the few things that I might have liked in Disney Star Wars in order to get rid of all of it, because it's essentially collateral damage. Disney does not deserve any respect for what they have done with Star Wars. Kathleen Kennedy does not deserve any respect. Bob Iger and anyone else involved with the decision making just does not deserve it. So we'll leave it at that, and just remember that Solo lost money. Reylos are weird. Fuck Disney Star Wars, and we will talk to you later.